Well, hey guys, Nabil here, and I'm very happy to have a very special guest with me today. It's none other than the writer of the recently announced and released The Last Blade webtoon on Tapas. It's none other than Hayden Robel. Hayden Robel, thank you so much for accepting this invitation. It really means a lot.
Thank you, Nabil. I mean, we mentioned it previously before we even started recording, but like, it's a dream come true to talk to you, man. Like, seriously, I've been watching your stuff forever, and really during the production and development of this project, it was really fun watching your videos and thinking in my head, one day maybe we'll be talking to each other. And hey, lo and behold, how the fates and how destiny turns out, we're talking today.
Thanks a lot for those nice words. Tell us first a bit about yourself in terms of how familiar are you with the world of Neo Geo and SNK games, and how familiar you were with Last Blade before actually getting to write the comic.
So yeah, just to give a little bit of background. Well, first of all, I work at Tapas Media. I'm the head of production and editorial over there. So it happened to be a really rare circumstance of, again, just speaking about fate and destiny. It's a big theme in the game, it's a big thing in the story, but truly with this project, it's very relevant as well. How it worked out is basically even before I joined Tapas, even before I had before it was even a little mote in my eye, I guess you'd say, to do this project, I had been a huge fan of SNK. I didn't really know it was SNK, particularly back when I was a kid. I was just playing the Neo Geo Red cab, like the MBS cab that was in our local pizza shop. I'd play Puzzle Bobble. I'd play Metal Slug, specifically Metal Slug X. I love that. That's my favorite, I think, of the Metal Slug series. And yeah, that's how I fell in love, even before I really was consciously aware of SNK and Neo Geo. Then later on, like in college and high school, towards the later half of high school, I became just a huge fan of SNK in general. Mainly, again, diving back into Metal Slug and eventually finding my way to Last Blade, which I mean, we'll talk about more, I'm sure, during this entire call. But really, what blew me away was just like the storytelling quality. There's so many elements we can get into. But I was a huge fan of the Neo Geo CD version in particular because the music, the arranged soundtrack was gorgeous, and honestly, in my opinion, easily one of the best of that era for like an arranged composition.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's really interesting that you're actually a fan of The Last Blade before you started working on this project, because I'm sure you know this, but a lot of adaptations really fail because the writer or people involved in general really don't know much about the franchise or the title, and they just, either it's a cash grab or just because that's the trending game, if you will, or series, and they just try to adapt it into something. Most of the time, it's a disaster, especially for fans. So it's really great to see that someone is actually a fan of the series before actually tackling it.
Yeah, I can't really speak much to the pantheon of video game comics, but I have, as a fan of comics myself, obviously, and reader and someone who works in the industry, I will say that there's the track record of video game adaptations has not always been the best. So that's something when we were setting out to do this project, and we can go a little bit more into detail about how it came about, et cetera, whenever you're ready. But that's kind of something that I was really passionate about day one when we were even talking about this. Was like, it needs to be something that's, number one, meant for the fans, and number two, something that like really focuses on the stories and characters first, and I think that's what's really important, and so hopefully something that's coming across so far in these early episodes that are out right now.
And that takes me to the next question, which is, why Last Blade? Honestly, I was really surprised because Last Blade, it is a great game, but compared to the other, SNK titles, specifically fighting games, it's kind of an obscure one. You can't. It's a great game, but it's not as popular as, let's say, Fatal of Fury, the King of Fighters, of course, or Samurai Showdown, which is making a splash because of the latest game that came out last year. So why specifically Last Blade? Was that your choice, Tapas' choice to go with Last Blade? Was it, what the story behind it?
So yeah, just to give a little background on how everything began. So it was really a matter of how business things work out, where it was connections after connections in terms of we were introduced to SNK, we spoke with SNK, and had some great conversations, had a great dinner during GDC of, I think it was 2018, around that time, with shout out to Takeshi Kimura, who used to work at SNK. We had a great conversation with him. And we talked about what could we do? What comics have been made of SNK properties? And we went through the list. And me being obviously a huge fan of Neo Geo, immediately what sparked my eye and what I was thinking of when it came to Tapas and our platform, which we're very much a storytelling creator first platform. We're all about trying to perpetuate our creators and make sure that they're like obviously telling the best stories possible so that readers can access them and support the creators. I digress. We out of the entire pantheon of projects that SNK, the amazing properties that they have, I just personally felt, and so did the rest of our team, that Last Blade was really just ripe for adaptation. There hadn't been obviously any media outside the U.S. There was a manga in Japan, from Neo Geo Band magazine. I can't remember what it was called, but there was a manga, and in various incarnation, there has been a Samurai Showdown manga. There has been KOF comics in particular. So we really wanted to tackle something that hadn't been tackled before, and we really wanted to do something that, at least in the West, and that was a big thing for us too, was like adapting something that would make sure to appeal to fans of the games, but also fans of anime and manga too. So yeah, I mean, to if I'm not rambling too much, the reason why we went with Last Blade again was purely because the story was really, really compelling and the characters were incredible. That was like the major reason, honestly.
And that's the thing with I did, I've been playing Last Blade. Unfortunately, when it came out, it was at the end of the arcade era, if you will, in my country. So we never had an arcade for Last Blade. I mean, I played the game later, through emulation, and then the various releases the game got. But I wasn't really familiar much about the story, and I did try recently to just go and read as much as I can, because I'm really a sucker for adaptations. It just really farms me up, and I want to play the games. I played the first one yesterday, tried to finish it and all that. But like the story of Last Blade, it's really, really difficult. Not difficult. It's a little bit, I would say, more complicated than your tournament story, your King of Fighters story, your basic revenge story. It just has so much things in it. Like there's revenge, there's this ancient tale and prophecies, and it's really convoluted for when you look at it for the first time. Like I went to the wikis and I'm still not sure what's really happening in there. So how challenging is that for you as a writer to make up a coherent story for this title?
Yeah, we could talk for hours about that process and how the development research period. I mean, honestly, you're right. Like, I think what's really it's a blessing and a curse of the project and the story really is that it has so many different multifaceted characters and so many different elements of the plot. Like you mentioned, there's aspects of Eastern mythology with the four beasts, being like really relevant to actual Eastern mythology and religions. That's one core element, but there's also the element of, yes, like adopted family and how like there's this dynamic between Yuki, Kaede, and Moria, and also again his kind of Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde form of being an awakened form versus his normal form, his normal form. Yeah, I guess that's how you'd refer to it, right? So, anyways, that was probably one of the biggest challenges at first, was not honestly parsing through the games, playing the games. In the past I played a lot, but I played a lot during the research period just to really get an idea of the presentation, the tone, being a lot more, serious too. I think that's something that is really compelling about Last Blade, is that it has a lot of drama and really it does focus a lot on how the characters are interacting with each other. So, what I first did was watch the sequence of events through Kaede's playthrough. I watched the stages to see, okay, how could this organically work in terms of like the stage progression? Is that possible? Is there actually like some sort of narrative construction here? And you know what? Really big, it's kudos to the amazing developers back in the day. And I think the writer, which I'm pretty sure was, I can't claim, I'm not sure. I never talked to him directly, but I heard that there was a lot of influence from Swery. If you know of Swery, who's another famous developer. And anyways, he and I think their team really just made sure that through the progression of the story, as much as it was just like, again, sequenced fights with a few cutscenes and vignettes in between, I was still able to, while playing the game, kind of articulate and imagine how this storyline can work with Kaede, like him starting out as someone who's a little bit insecure, going through like different periods of him not being the best fighter to then becoming the best fighter, or at least becoming a little bit more confident in his abilities. So it was really, really challenging to thread pretty much from just backgrounds and wiki pages and all these other things, thread these characters together and make it to where they actually organically interact with each other, which I think was a huge challenge, was trying to make sure that everyone was given their full display and given their time to shine.
Because that's another problem you see with a lot of adaptations for fighting games, is that a lot of these other characters, are just, they only appear as cameos, or they just pass in by. So it's kind of always difficult to like make a good story and involve all the characters. And one thing comes to mind, like the famous, it's still one of the greatest adaptation, which is the Street Fighter 2, the movie, the animated movie, or where Akuma was actually like selling potatoes on the side of the street. So how can you avoid these kind of things with this huge number of characters? And most of the time you have a limited number of issues, limited time, etc.
So thanks for bringing that up, Nabil, because I specifically with webcomics, there's really, really aggressive pacing because you can only have around 45 to 55 panels maximum usually per episode. That's just how the industry works. It's a very it's established from manhwa in Korea. So I digress. With this story, one thing that I really wanted to focus on was having at least 2 episode arcs per characters, even if they were minor characters. So that means that there'd be some sort of featuring of spoiler alert, I will say every character in The Last Blade, the first game, does appear, and maybe some characters beyond the first game appear in this adaptation. It is focused primarily on the first game. The first 2 seasons, so 24 episodes, are focused primarily on adapting that first game and then trying to really expand upon those events so that it could lead further into the events of the games as well. That was a really, that's probably like the biggest challenge for sure, though, to this day, was figuring out how to get that right balance. And I guess you guys you'll decide, Nabil, if we succeeded at that. But I think the biggest way of avoiding that is just, trying to figure out how can these characters always serve the main thorough line of the story, right? So, like, for example, there's side characters like, I don't want to spoil the story too much, but let's say there's a side character like Okina, for example. How do you feature him? Again, Okina, he's like one of the older guy who uses the turtles, right? How do you feature him in the story? Well, he acts more as a mentor and kind of a trainer to Kaede. So he's still supporting the main storyline, and he's still actually a fully fleshed character in and of itself, with some fun, like, dynamic, like, character bits in between. But it's always, again, contributing to Kaede's story and contributing towards their family story, Moria and Yuki's as well. I think that's how you avoid that kind of problem when you're writing a video game adaptation, is that always think about what's your thorough line, what's your main quest, and how does that fit into that quest.
And honestly, from the first 3 episodes, it's I'm really happy with what I've seen. So it's still not a lot of plot. Of course, it's you still lay on the ground on what's going to happen. But you brought up the medium, which is the webcomic or the webtoons, which is a medium. Honestly, I wasn't aware of until about 4 or 5 months ago, when there was a King of Fighters webtoon in Korea being published, and that's what I even heard the word webtoon. When I heard webtoon, I thought it was some sort of animation for the web. That's really what I thought. And then kind of exactly, because it kind of feels I'm a huge comic fan as well. So, but this is a completely different beast. It kind of feels to me like it's almost like a storyboard kind of thing. Like it's like it's an anime, and it's those images are taken from it. It's a different medium, but it's new, and I do see a future for it in the US and in the West in general. So what do you think about the medium? Do you think it has a place among the established comics and mangas?
Speaking from a place of bias, obviously being like an executive here at Tapas, but truthfully, even before I joined, I was also a huge fan of manga in particular. Mainly, I used to prior to this to Tapas, I worked briefly at Viz Media, so like Shonen Jump. Huge. I grew up on Dragon Ball Z, grew up on Rurouni Kenshin, which obviously, as we know, really inspired Blade. That's something that I also, when I first even reading webcomics for the first time, I think what blew me away about that medium and why it's super impressive is the immersion of it. The immersive aspect of how our tablets, how our phones, and how the web scrolls allows for a lot of infinite kind of canvas options in terms of, like, let's say, for example, in the first panel of Last Blade, you see how we're scanning basically from the clouds all the way down to the ground. That's something that a traditional comic could do, but due to the limitations of a 9x5 or 11x5, whatever the page format would be, it kind of struggles with. It has to do its own really creative page panel layout that's different from the vertical scroll, which allows for a lot, I think, more, I would say a lot more traditionally cinematic, like panning and stuff like that you'd see in movies, or as you'd see in like in animation. So I think you're on the same boat there as well. But yeah, I think webcomics in particular are the future. I really do believe that. And I really think that not just in terms of the format, which obviously, as we spoke about for horror, I think in particular really works out well if you want to like hide a scare at the bottom. When you turn a page of a book, you kind of already, you can see that scare immediately. When you're scrolling, you can't really, you have no idea what's going to happen. So I think there's also that level of anticipation there's an advantage there too. But webcomics really allow for a direct creator and community reach in terms of like, on Tapas, for example, you can talk to your creator, you can give ink to your creator, which is like the support system, not just to buy comics, but you can also donate them like Patreon. And I think that level of integration, thanks to being a digital format, is something that really is honestly light years ahead of what other like industries are doing right now in terms of the entertainment industry. That's, I mean, there's so many other reasons why I think webcomics are like really impressive because of that, and why Last Blade in particular, it's really cool to be mixing this older IP with something that an older game with something that is, in my opinion, like kind of cutting edge in terms of the comics industry.
True, I agree. And so another thing that I noticed in the first few episodes, and honestly, I didn't notice that until yesterday. Now, when I did my review, I didn't notice this cool thing, which is when I was playing the game yesterday, the first game, I noticed that you guys are using the stages and the details on the background, everything is in there, and it's just really amazing. And even those little cutscenes that, there was a cutscene showing, this foreigner on, being, carried. And that exact same scene is translated to the webcomic. And just that shows the level of fan service this comic has in its 3 episodes. So can we expect more of that?
Yeah, I'm so happy to hear that someone noticed that, because I was honestly, during the writing process and obviously during the creative process, the team, which I have to really give a huge shout out to the team, at some point in this video, but obviously our amazing colorist Dojo, our amazing artists, Cocoon Production, which that's a various artists, but often 123, I think he goes by on Twitter. Search him out, and Letterer, Alex Kulang, etc. There's so many talented people that like had some contribution to this project to make it happen. But during those specific bits you mentioned, like copying kind of the intro scrolls of the game, it goes back to what I mentioned before when I was really developing and researching the project with SNK. My goal was to try to integrate as many elements of the game as possible that wouldn't interrupt the flow of the story, and would only build towards the pacing. So like you mentioned, that scene, like that sequence, yes, you could absolutely expect more of those. There'll be quite a few more. The backgrounds are very, very detailed, and that's something that we really try to be ambitious about in terms of adapting. And we hope that most of those details are something that other fans will notice too. And we even actually interpreted a lot of those aspects into the story, which I think was an additional, which was really fun for me. It was just really fun to see a turtle in the background and try to make that turtle actually part of the narrative of the story somehow.
That's pretty cool. That sounds awesome. And since you brought the team working on the project, so can you walk us a little bit on the process from you starting to, you come up with the idea of the story to the pages or the panels being published on the medium on Tapas?
Sure. Well, the process begins with an outline, episode beat outline. So we start first with a summary overview of how the story is going to flow. From there, we get that approval. Obviously, SNK is involved in every single step. By the way, every single step, their eyes are on it. So we go from there to the scripting phase. We go to after the scripting phase, it'll go through sometimes of an editorial round, depending on the processes, obviously. And after that, it will go immediately to thumbnails or storyboards, as the animation industry calls them. And from there, sketches, and then line art and colors. It's very, very stage by stage production. Sometimes we'll have layered production where occasionally you'll have letters being done during like the lining phase, etc. So that's the beauty of comics, is that it's usually kind of one person dedicated to each role. And that's why I mentioned our amazing team that we have. Kind of like we're masters of every single individual trade, so it only contributed to the total work being better. But yeah, that's the that's pretty much the process in a nutshell.
So how long, like, for example, it would take from one episode from scripting process to it being available on the platform?
It would take, sometimes it depends. Different projects work at different paces, but for this one, particularly on Last Blade, it would take usually around 3 days, 3 to 7 days to script something. Obviously, I've been thinking about the scripts and thinking about the storyline for months, so I think that's honestly where the majority of writing actually happens, is during the thinking stage and the developing stage. The execution phase is kind of much more fast. So that would take around 3 days. And then from there, it would be around, all intents and purposes, probably around 2 to 3 weeks to 4 weeks per episode, depending on revisions, obviously, depending on approval processes. So I would say we could probably usually produce around like 2 to 3 episodes a month generally. But again, very much takes a lot of approval processes and very much takes a lot of care. And sometimes you go in there and revise completely different scenes. So it really varies. But that, I would say, on the fastest end, 2 to 3 weeks. On the slowest end, probably it could be upwards of a few months.
Cool. And how you said SNK has been involved throughout the process. So they basically have to approve, I guess, the story, and do they have to approve pretty much everything that you guys put on the platform in terms of the story for Last Blade?
SNK has been a really amazing partner, and as a fan, it was really fun to be able to work with them directly. Obviously, as you have, I'm sure, Nabil, you could probably share your experiences too. They approve every single thing that passes through. We send them all the art. They've already approved the story long in advance. The story has been written for quite a while. That we just go through every single phase together. Any revisions, we'll get direct revisions and write-ups from their art team, which is awesome. It's really cool to see all the Japanese written on the side of our panels. It's just the rest of the team have become fans after obviously working on the project. But for me and for the rest of the team, we've really been honored, I feel like, to get direct feedback from some of the SNK's artists. I think that's been really one of the coolest things too, just to see how they interpret these characters that obviously, again, haven't really had a fair shake since the late 90s.
Yeah. Well, that's a good thing that they're involved. So I guess, if something, they propose to have something done in a different way, did it happen before where they said, no, don't, I mean, you don't have to go into specifics, obviously, but I mean, did it happen when they said, no, I would rather do it this way or that way? Or were they we trust you, and just as long as you're treating these characters right, we're fine with it?
Yeah, I mean, it's much more of the latter, like you mentioned, of they gave us a lot of generosity and a lot of trust in how to tell the story. There's obviously give and take. There's definitely situations, definitely scenes even that we had to completely revise based on feedback from SNK's team and even our team. So it's definitely give and take. There's even been times where parts of the story of the original games had to be completely modified for the comic. So that's kind of what we mentioned when we mentioned it being more of a reimagining as well as kind of a canon story, is because there's a lot of elements of those old games that, if you even look at the sprites, for example, of Washizuka, you'll see there's some inconsistencies between where his cuts are. So we had to really clarify some of the elements of the game, which is exciting as a fan to make a logical thread between why he has those cuts on his cheek, for example. We had the chance to tell that part of the story, which hadn't been, even, I think, talked about at all anywhere else. So they've been really, really cool, and really just, again, super trusting of Tapas. And I guess it's been really just a dream come true in terms of how how collaboration would work. I never imagined it to be as smooth as it has been.
No, that sounds great, because a lot of, unfortunately, as I said before, some companies will just license the products and just don't really care what other companies are doing with it, and that's how, again, as I said, you get some really bad adaptations and adaptations where you only have the name of the game on it, but the content is completely different. So that's a good thing to see SNK quite involved. Now you mentioned that, and I've read it. I can't remember where I read it, but it's you guys announced 2 seasons for now. So what you're saying is that those 2 seasons are going to be only for the first game, correct?
I don't want to spoil parts of the story. I will say that it focuses primarily on the first game. Yeah, but the events of the second game, those are we'll touch upon that later in the story.
All right. All right. So are there plans? I mean, is this a 2 seasons and the story will be done, or are there chances for getting more seasons down the line?
So I honestly have to really say this, and I wanted to come on here to directly say is that it really, really depends on how the fans interact with this story and how the fans engage with it, and really, honestly, how the title performs. Obviously, I think it's really, really important to SNK and Tapas, and it's something that we really want to see succeed. So to speak between the words, I would say that if people want to see more projects and want to see more seasons, it'd be great if everyone could go and read the project.
Oh, definitely. I mean, and if anybody checks those 3 episodes, I'm sure they're gonna come back for more because they're really well done. And for fans of SNK, and again, as someone who knows Last Blade, played it before, but was not really familiar with the story, it's really intriguing. I'm really trying to understand a lot of the game's plot. What's wrong with Kaide? Why is he, getting this, turning his hair turning yellow and all that, and all those the old gods or four gods? Or as I said, it was very confusing reading the wiki. So I'm really happy to find a medium where I can understand the story. So I'm sure people will feel the same.
The background kind of goes into detail about that too, I guess. But that was something that we really struggled with too. Is like, how do we interpret like that four gods element? How does that work? And to be honest, that part of the story was the part where we probably really struggled to do the most. Was like, how can we figure out like how to make it to where it's like something that doesn't distract? Because again, the real reason why you read any and think about when you play a fighting game, you're in love with the characters, you love their designs, you love their quotes. So that's something that we really wanted to do too, is like make sure that subplot was only, again, kind of supporting the characters and supporting their thorough line. But I totally agree with you on that too.
So this is the first project you guys are doing on the SNK. Are there chances that you guys will adapt other IPs, besides The Last Blade down the line?
There are definitely ambitions. There's definitely obviously a want, and there's definitely from both sides. And like I mentioned earlier, all I can really say is it's really important that if fans want more, that they come out and support this project.
Definitely, and it'll be coming out every Tuesday, right? Is that every Tuesday we'll have a new episode?
Every Wednesday, yeah.
Every Wednesday, all right. Every Wednesday, okay. And now, personally, what would be your second dream project if you have to work on an SNK IP, another comic? Which one would you tackle besides The Last Blade?
There's so many. For me, I don't think I'm not sure if I would ever. If anyone would give me the money to do so, but I would love to do this. I would love to do King of the Monsters. I think that'd be really cool as a comic. That's like a really obscure, I feel like.
That's a very interesting choice. I didn't expect that.
I'm a huge Godzilla fan, but beyond that, obviously, I think that it was really cool. We don't really have a lot of kaiju games. We have Destroy All Monsters, obviously. Yeah. We don't have many of those. So a comic would be cool too, because we even have less of those. We even have less comics, I feel like, based on that. But for a less obscure pick, probably amongst the pantheon of their works. Again, I have a Fatal Fury, like a Guro Mark.
Oh, really cool.
Yeah, I have a really big soft spot in my heart for like Guro specifically, and I would love to. It'd be a dream to continue that storyline if there's no intent to continue the games. Of course, I hope they continue the games. I have no knowledge of whether that's happening. But it would also be great to maybe do like a Metal Slug project. I think that would be really cool. Again, what I love about SNK is that, a lot of developers of the era did this, but I feel like SNK did it the best, was how much charm they put into each character, how much care they had for the mythos around their characters as well. Like KOF, I love how all the interconnected stories work together. Even Fatal Fury ties into that, Art of Fighting, etc. So I would hope that we can maybe do something like that and really just continue to expand and whatever IP we go with, continue to kind of adapt that story with the kind of story focus in mind, and let the games obviously play themselves.
Well, hopefully that really happens. I mean, a lot of fans, I'm sure fans will support that work, because we're all fans here and we all want it, a proper adaptation of these titles. And one of the thing that I like about SNK compared to other fighting games developers or game publishers, that they put a lot of time, a lot of effort into the story. And of course, games, especially in the 90s, games were not really a strong story medium. So there's always that need for something more to elaborate on those characters and those story threads. So to see something like that done now, it's really, really big. And I really hope that fans are going to support it, because we need more of these. So we would love a Fatal Fury. We would love proper King of Fighters story that starts from the beginning. So hopefully that happens.
I would love
this.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to talk about, like, what are the chances of things like this, like the Last Blade webcomic, of getting adapted into some sort of animation? While I did some of the research, I saw that a couple webtoons have been adapted into anime, not as much as mangas into animes, and that's maybe because the medium itself is still relatively new. So what do you think are the chances, or for it to happen, what do you think it needs to achieve for it to one day be adapted into an anime?
So in terms of achievement, obviously as many people reading it as possible is always great for any sort of project, and people engaging and sharing it. I think that's really important too, and trying to make sure that there is some sort of readership for it. That kind of groundswell. Really, I can't say enough that a lot that means the world to a lot of these people in production and people that make decisions. Is not just obviously the relativity of the IP in terms of its in terms of how it's known, in terms of like its familiarity. Obviously, something like KOF, for example, has had a few anime adaptations, which I enjoyed. I think there's been a mixed bag of some, but I digress. The chances of Last Blade specifically, it comes down. I'm sorry for being a broken record. It really comes down to the support from fans, obviously, and moreover than that, it really, if people keep asking for it, I mean, we've seen some crazy things happen. We've seen like Final Fantasy VII remake happen. We've seen some amazing things that gamers, I feel like myself, I have always believed is vaporware happening. And in my opinion, purely due to fan support and people really, trying to pursue that. So totally, I would say this, it's totally possible. And we're definitely always looking into our options in terms of how to really bring the story to as many people as possible. And to me, that means, different version, like like a printed version, that'd be awesome. Or for example, it'd be really cool. I would love to see an anime of The Last Blade. It'd be really cool. I think it really captured a lot of that Rurouni Kenshin spirit that we're kind of missing these days.
It does. I really hope so too. Now, before we go, can you tell us what to expect from the comic? Of course, without spoiling anything. But what should we expect from the Last Blade webtoon from Tapas?
Expect more lightning, for one. expect some more lightning. I'll let you know that there will be more awakened Kaede for sure. There will be plenty more to do with who and the motivations around what happened to Kaede's father, Gaisei, obviously, and more so kind of exploring the feelings of how Kaede is moment to moment. That's one thing that I hope people are able to see, and we'll see if it was effective, is really seeing his character go through different emotions, go through different phases of, again, confidence, because to me, at the core of the story, core of Last Blade, and something that I think you'll maybe see, hopefully, is the core of Last Blade is all about Kaede kind of finding himself and finding his way. It's really a coming of age kind of story, finding his way in this world where the world's already constantly shifting. It's changing dramatically in a time period, 1863, when like everything was opening up. Obviously, isolationist period for Japan was ending. It's kind of the end of samurai, end of swordsmen. So it's really that setting alone really is just so rich, and that's something that captured my attention also. And I think that's something that you'll hopefully see happen a little bit more. Beyond that, I mean, you'll also see plenty of new characters. I'll say that again. I could honestly say, and this isn't a spoiler, but you will see every single character from at least the original Last Blade. And like I said, I don't want to go into too many details about the future of what that means. But you can pretty much read between the lines there.
I'm really excited for that, and I'm sure other fans will be when they hear this. So, Hayden, do you have any message to the Neo Geo fans community and the Neo Geo Now fans?
Well, first of all, thank you, Nabil, and thank everyone at Neo. Obviously, the Neo Geo Now community. I have been reading all of your guys' comments too. So, if you have any feedback, I'd love to. I'd love to hear them. You could read them either on. You could put them on the comic itself. put them on the Neo Geo Now videos, I'll definitely be reading them either way. So I would love to hear what you guys think. And really, I think one thing I can honestly say is that this has been a huge dream come true. And one thing I could say is that as a fan of SNK, as someone who also is in the same boat as everyone else, who's really starving for more content, more kind of stories from, obviously, again, the really amazing library that we all enjoy and love to play. I think it's really, really important to go out here and kind of, show that support. And if we could even, if we could even get like half of the amount of people that are on Neo Geo Now reading the project, that would be a success. That'd be a big success. So really, thank you guys for having the trust also in us and our team to help tell this story too, because I think hopefully it's clear that we really do care. And at the end of the day, this project is all for you. It's a love letter to you.
Well, we'll definitely be, following the comic, and I'll definitely be checking back with you as more episodes come in so that we have more information, more things to talk about in the future. Well, Hayden, thank you so much for accepting this. It's really an honor, and can't wait to see what you guys are tapas, preparing for the rest of the episodes for the Last Blade webtoon.
We're excited to show you more. And Nabil, definitely, I would love to do some sort of retrospective at the end. It'd be great to talk more and show you more too.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much, Hayden.
Thank you, Nabil.